Welcome to the MSL 411, a podcast designed to equip both aspiring and experienced MSLs with the resources they need to level up their career toolkit. The heart of this podcast is to take the same industry knowledge and advice that we share with our own candidates and make it available and accessible to anyone looking for answers. So if you have questions, you've come to the right place. We're here to give you the 411. And without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome back to another episode of MSL 411. I'm your host, Linda Eskew, and I am genuinely excited about today's conversation. We have someone joining us today who brings a really special blend of experience from high-level commercial roles to medical affairs leadership. He has a personal story as well that's just fascinating. So I want to welcome Dr. Corey Hicks to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Corey.
Thank you. And it is indeed a pleasure to be here. I greatly appreciate you for inviting me to come to your platform. So thank you.
Absolutely. And before we get into our topic for today, I want to give our audience a little sense of who you are. And I promise I'll keep it short, Corey, but your background is very diverse, very interesting. And so we could easily take up an entire episode with this, but I'll try to keep it pretty brief. But what I love about your story is, and one of the reasons I wanted you on this podcast is because of how multidimensional it is. You're someone with more than 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech space. You're also a former elite athlete, a 3-time NCAA All-American decathlete in track and field, a 1996 Olympic hopeful, and even a 2009 KSU Hall of Fame inductee. And on top of that, as if that's not enough, you are also a 2-time author. You've spent years inspiring people as a national and international speaker, focusing on everything from leadership and emotional intelligence to health and wellness, stress management, and self-empowerment. And your academic path is equally as rich. You've earned multiple degrees, including a PhD in health and human performance. And you've published research in health literacy with a focus on health disparities and exercise as treatment for mental and physical disease. On top of all of that, you teach, you mentor, and you even run your own organization, the 3Vs LLC, which is something that is dedicated to empowerment and personal growth. So Corey, that's just a quick run through of some of your world. Anything that I missed before we jump in?
No, I think that's about it. Yes, I've had the opportunity to do quite a bit of things. I truly have been, it's been a blessing to have the opportunity afforded to me to have vast amount of experiences such as the ones that I've done and continue to do today. So thank you for that.
Well, we're going to touch on probably a little bit of all of the above, but primarily today we're going to be diving into a topic that you are uniquely qualified to speak about, and that's what it looks like to transition from the commercial side of pharma into an MSL or medical affairs role, and why your experience on both sides gives you a really powerful lens into collaboration, communication, and impact. So I want to get into that, but of course, I always like to start off with a couple of softball down the middle questions, just so folks can get to know you a little bit as a person first. But what is a hobby or interest that you have that people might not expect?
Man, you know what? I love to golf, so I would say that people probably that would be something that someone maybe probably would expect. I like to fish. I do like to fish, and I'm a writer, and so that probably will be the biggest thing. I've wrote several books, but I like to write every day. I write motivational, inspirational quotes. So that probably would be something that people wouldn't expect outside of just fishing and playing golf. So.
We hail from the PGA headquarters area of Texas over here, so the golf is getting big in our areas. How about if you could master any skill unrelated to the ones that you've already mastered, of course, and anything unrelated to your career, what skill would you love to add to your belt?
Add to my belt. I'm trying to think. I don't necessarily know if it's just a skill, but to be able to bring peace and joy to the world,
Mhm.
to be able to everyone that I come in contact with, be able to have a piece of me rub off on them, just to be able to add more joy and peace. So that probably would be the biggest thing. I really and truly, I love being an equalizer. I really and truly like to bring out the best in anyone that I'm around. I've had a background as a coach for quite some time, working with a lot of elite level athletes. and I just like bringing out the best. But the biggest thing is helping people to get to where they're, whatever your dreams and goals are, and being able to help individuals move from point A to point Z and do it in a way that is growth, is development, but it's rewarding. So peace and joy.
I love that.
Yes.
We can all use more of that. Well, that kind of brings me into my next topic. So, before we dive fully into the medical affairs, tell us a little bit about your life outside of work. You've had this fascinating journey, this time as an elite athlete, all these things that you've done. What is your life like day to day outside of work? And maybe you can share a little bit about those chapters of your life that have led you to where you are today.
Well, yes, as you know, I do work. There's quite a bit of things that I do, but really and truly, I love doing a lot of humanitarian work just outside of that. At one point, I used to coach. I currently serve. I've been an ambassador for the University of Chicago, Concordia Chicago University, so the PhD program. So I've done a lot of mentoring. I've also had an opportunity to serve as a professor at the University of London. And so that's truly been a pleasure. And then I'm in Ghana, a chief down in Ghana. So I travel to Ghana maybe twice a year. And I certainly love to do a lot of humanitarian work, health fairs, blood pressure screenings, cancer screenings for the individuals that are in that area. So I'm very passionate, I guess, about humanitarian type work and again being a life changer.
I love that your platform for all these things is not just here in the US, but you have such an international platform as well. I mean, that could have been your thing people don't know about you. That's really incredible. It's inspiring. How has your diverse background, all these things, your interests, your passions, your drivers, how has all of that package shaped the way you connect with people now in your field roles?
Yeah, because just learning individuals, I want to see on the commercial side, because when you're in sales, there's a lot of behaviors. You know how people learn and absorb information, kinesthetic, auditory, or visual learners, but learning different styles of how people interact, how they engage, and not just that, learning and understanding emotional intelligence is
Mhm.
key. From that perspective point of view, it's helped me to be that much more effective and successful on the medical side because a lot of the skill sets, the soft skills, the interpersonal relationships, how to build relationships, establishing a presence specifically within the office, some of the skill sets, you don't necessarily receive those when you first come into medical because most of the people who leave from academia. They may have practice various roles, but very few individuals leave from a role that there's a lot of customer engagement. And so I have really utilized that to my advantage in terms of, again, establishing relationships, learning areas, using a lot of the skill sets that I learned on the commercial side in sales in terms of interpersonal skills, just to be that much more effective in engaging with a lot of the healthcare providers that I interact with. So.
And you've written books on this, so you definitely have an insight into the emotional intelligence and all of that. So you bring so much of that with you into your career, and it does kind of spill out into how you interact with the people in your role. But can you walk us a little bit through your career path and ultimately how you discovered medical affairs, if you don't mind?
Okay, so I started off as initially on the commercial side, having the opportunity to participate as a sales rep. So I worked in cardiology for probably maybe like 2 years in cardiology. Then I went from cardiology to rare disease, working with MS. And so with that, I had a chance to work in sales, then was promoted to the position as a product manager in marketing. When I left, I worked in sales a little bit, probably longer, but I got into marketing for quite some time, maybe 8 to 9 years, working on the marketing side. And I have also worked in managed markets, associate director of customer marketing. So when you do all of these, you look at, okay, what are some of the things that I really and truly want to do? Do you want to work as a regional director? If you're looking for 10-year goals, do you want to be a vice president of an organization or a CEO? But the clinical side of it, because of my educational background, because I was initially a school teacher, that always prevailed. And I finally just look back and say, why was I successful in the positions? First of all, having good interpersonal skills, but knowing how to transfer that information, knowing how to take complicated information and break it down. So that helped me to be effective as a salesperson. But then after a while, there was a void, because when you're working in sales, and sales is amazing, there are a lot of sales representatives that have an absorbent amount of information that they know and able to give very good data, but a lot of the data that you give are talking points. And so, in terms of taking a deeper dive into the clinical information, there's a limit, because there is a firewall from a compliance point of view in terms of things that you can and cannot talk on. And that was my driving force, because I had won Sales Rep of the Year, President's Clubs, had won all type of awards, but there was still a void. And that void was, I wanted something that was going to be a tad bit more challenging. And so when I was working as an account manager for EMD Serono, and at that time I had already finished my master's degree, and I went into my PhD degree, not necessarily wanting it, but to know that if I wanted to accomplish the goals that I had set for myself, that was going to be the pathway I had to go. I needed to go down that way. If not, well, then I would have to stay on the commercial route. Either, because I'd already worked as a marketing associate director of customer marketing, whether it be marketing director or vice president or so forth. But the clinical side, again, it was always that much more engaging. So lo and behold, I completed my PhD degree, was working for EMD Serono, and they were expanding their MSL team. And so I had the opportunity to come on board with their MSL team, which was an amazing experience to finally have an introduction into what medical affairs is all about. And sometimes we go into it clueless, because when you're looking at the commercial side, sometimes the commercial side can take for granted the value that the medical team truly brings, meaning the data and the knowledge. Because the way that I prepared and planned in terms of learning my information from commercial was completely different than the way that I had to prepare and plan for the information on the medical side. From a commercial point of view, it was talking points, but from a medical point of view, it was much more of the peeling back the onion, being able to present the data and dealing with the tough questions that you get, not just talking points, but the real data that's coming from the publications, the studies, and being up to date on everything that's taking place. And so to me, that was kind of a rejuvenation of really and truly feeling just back excited about everything, feeling excited about the pharmaceutical industry, about the direction in which I was heading. And it was a different challenge. And I tell people, I did the decathlon, which was 10 events, so 10 events, 100 long jump, shot put, high jump, 400-meter dash, 110 hurdles, discus, javelin, and the pole vault, and then the 1500. But when you're doing that, each day is something different. And sometimes when you're in a position for a long time, it can become repetitive and sometimes even boring. But on the medical side, there was always something challenging, new data to learn, going to the congresses, sitting, doing the lectures and the different sessions. And so again, it was a challenge that I had prepared for. I had placed myself in a position. And once that opportunity presented itself, I knew that I had made the right decision. And so again, there was a learning curve like with anything that you do. But once I got up to speed, I felt at home.
Well, and I think from the outside looking in, so many people would see all the successes and all the accolades that you received on the commercial side and think, why would you start all over in a different faction of medical affairs? So kind of that question of what drew you into the
Yeah.
medical side. But I can get it after hearing your explanation that even though you had all those years of success on the commercial side, there was still that excitement, that connection to the science, the clinical aspect that the medical side brings that maybe filled in that gap for you. Is that what you would say?
Well, that's right. And one of my lifelong dreams had been is was to be on the medical side, to
Yeah.
work as a medical science liaison. But I knew that that was at one point was far fetched, because I knew I would needed to go back to complete my PhD degree if that's something that I wanted to do. And sometimes it can be difficult. You're working a full-time job and then you're going back to school, with the load that you have, trying to maintain the metrics, that each organization set before you, sometimes it can be difficult. And
Mhm.
so that was more of a 10-year goal, but I know is that it will come sooner than what I initially thought. But again, I wanted to also make sure that I was a well-rounded individual. Having the experience that I've had on the commercial side and now 8 years on the medical side, going on 9 years, it has truly made me a well-rounded individual and placed in certain positions. It helps me to bridge both groups together, to show them how to effectively communicate. How can commercial communicate with medical? How can medical
Mhm.
communicate? And then the differences that sometimes go unsaid. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that no one never addresses. And so when certain questions come up on either side, I'm able to give them different perspectives of the what and the why, which they can definitely appreciate. And it makes me that much more value within the organization because I'm able to give those different perspectives. So,
Mhm.
in order to bring everyone collaboratively together for one common goal, and that's to be successful.
And there's so much difference to the way you approach things, and you kind of touched on that, the way you approach things on the commercial side and the way you're allowed to approach things on the medical side. So a lot of times there can be kind of a barrier for folks who maybe are in commercial and wanting to follow your footsteps and go over to the medical side. And one question that you and I had talked about when we were having a previous conversation before this podcast episode, and it kind of helped form the basis of what we're talking about today. But you said that a lot of people ask you how you made the switch, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but what did that transition look like for you? And what would you say to folks who ask you that question? They're on the commercial side and like, how did you do this? What did it take for you to be successful in making that transition?
Well, and I'm glad you asked that question because, yes, I'm asked that question quite a bit. You have to put together a strategic plan. If that's something that you want to do, you have to find a program that's going to be beneficial for you. All programs, depending on, can be somewhat demanding. I had a online program that was phenomenal, but it was very engaging. The academic rigor was something. It was very tough doing Concordia University because if you're doing that, the first question that individuals ask is, let me see the core courses that you had the opportunity to go through. Because some of these courses could be makeshift, but when individuals had a chance to look at it, and I love Concordia because there's a comprehensive exam, your comps exam that you have to pass even before you go into your dissertation phase. So yes, you can be successful at all of the courses, but unless you pass that comprehensive exam, then you don't go any further. And the year that I took that comp, there was 22 people who took the comp exam and only one person passed, and that was me. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it was very, very rigorous, but it placed me into a position to be successful. I learned a lot from it. And so, Concordia University does a phenomenal job. There's other universities too. If individuals want to reach out to me via email, I'll be more than happy to share with them some of the programs. But that's the first thing that you do. You find a program that's going to be convenient. You look at the courses. I've had the opportunity to work with Concordia University too in building a PhD program that's around individuals who aspire to be an MSL with the core courses that they will get the necessary classes that are directly associated with it. And a good friend of mine did a phenomenal job in terms of creating the health and human performance program, and it's HHP, but it's cardiology, neurology, kinesiology. It's a lot of sociology course, psychology courses. There's a lot of grant courses, but there's a lot of scientific core courses, and the rigor of the courses is again, it can be demanding, but it will place you in a position by the time that you come out of the program to go to any MSL team and be very successful. So again, find the program that you want to do, and
Mhm.
then just you don't necessarily have to take two courses. I took one course a quarter, and I just took my time, and it took me probably maybe right around 4 years to get through the core courses. And then
Mhm.
it was probably a year on my PhD program. But one of the things that I did midway through, one of my professors, she was phenomenal. One of the ideals that I have focused on, she really helped me to hone in on it and say, hey, if I was you, I would utilize that as my dissertation topic. And probably, I want to say, midway or towards the later part of the program, I started focusing. So a lot of my writing was around the area of the perception of health literacy in elderly African American men. I was passionate about that because I lost my uncle and my father to untimely diseases that probably could have been prevented had they been a little bit more proactive in terms of just preventative health care. But I was able to take a lot of the papers that I had written and shape them to help me go through the dissertation phase. And I loved it and I enjoyed it. And even now, I work on a lot of things around. I have several publications in social determinants of health. I do a lot of things outside of just my current job in the area of health literacy and social determinants of health. So once you find the program, and then you want to make sure too with the companies that you're with, the organizations, hopefully they will be willing. And some organizations will pay for that. They will pay for that master's or that PhD program. But once you get the buy-in from your employee that you're working with, work the process, and then have an opportunity to do some of these rotations. Some of the biggest mistakes that we may make at times is to jump into something and not have the experience around it to see if it's something you're going to really and truly like. So while you're in school, have the opportunity to participate into some of the rotations within your employers, depending on, what pharmaceutical companies that you are working with or that are close to something that you are aspiring to do, and whether it be in health economics, outcome research, or it could be in government affairs. I don't know if it's a lot of rotations that you can do on medical affairs, and there may be some without having that clinical background. But if you are in a PhD program, they may be more willing to do so. And then just working that plan. And that's what I did. That's kind of how I asked questions. I had an opportunity to present, even though I was on a commercial team. I built relationships with key individuals that were on the medical side to let them know of my interests. And so by the time that I was almost through my dissertation phase, I kind of knew what direction that I was heading into, and I started to apply for positions that were available. So by the time I finished, I was ready to move right into a position because I had already let them know that I was interested. And so if I was someone who they felt would be great for that position, then we timed it right to transition into that position upon my graduation. So I know I said a lot, but I wanted to give people something into my thought process of kind of what I went through before I just switched over.
No, I think that perfectly answers that it's not just a flipping of a switch. You don't just
That's right.
decide one day, I want to be an MSL. I'm going to switch sides, so to speak. That it does take some planning, some preparation, some strategy even. And I love some of the things that you mentioned. First, you took the time to research what you would need to do, the coursework, things like that,
Mhm.
and found an amazing course. And I love that you're kind of giving back in that area as well. I think a lot of people are going to have more questions for you about that, but also looking at the resources that are available with the company that you were with, but also using your network within the company and maybe even some of the collaborations that were already existing to kind of foster those relationships with folks that were on that medical side to see what was needed, let them know you were interested. And then by doing that coursework, I mean, obviously they're seeing that you're dedicated, that it's something that you're willing to go after and put in the work for. So why wouldn't they want to have you on their medical affairs team once you've done all that work? Because obviously it shows a lot of dedication. So no, I think every bit of that was meaningful for people to hear that that's the process. Those are the steps you took. That was the path that brought you to where you were. I think another part of making that shift, not just in the how to do it, but the mindset shift. When you're working in commercial, the way you work is different than when you're in medical affairs. The things you can talk about, the way your managers expect you to perform. So, what were some of the biggest mindset shifts that you had to make when you finally made that move from commercial into medical?
Just a clinical component of understanding, because that's another challenge. If I bring someone from commercial, can they be compliant? Are they a bull in a china cabinet? Because there's etiquette to the way that you do things. You're not a salesperson. Now you're a clinical educator. So it's different. And so the way that you share that information, yes, it's good to be passionate about your data, but can you present it being being non-biased in terms of not biased about the information that you're presenting. Can you just present it? It's just if the data is what the data is, the data will speak for itself. You don't have to add anything extra. You don't have to bring out key points or talking points or things that we think that our customers want to see, but we allow the data to speak for itself. And that's the biggest learning curve. You coming from commercial, everything that you do, you're passionate about. And it's not bad to be passionate,
Hmm.
but there is a tactful manner of how you present the information. If you're in the academic setting, no one wants to hear a walking commercial. They just want to hear the data. They want you to present it. They don't want you to be biased to the way that you present it, but let the data speak for itself. And if they have questions, then you can answer those clinical questions to the point in which they're satisfied. But I'm not pushing the data down. You know how people say, I'm force feeding it to you. No, I'm giving you the data so you can understand it, absorb it. And if there's clinical questions that you have, you can always come back to me. But I want you to know that I'm tactful. I'm going to respect your opinion regardless. And hopefully, if there's some questions or objections that you may have about the study format or the way that the data was presented, was it a subset analysis or was it intent to treat? All of these things are things specifically that we look into the design of it. How many people were in the trial? Why did they have such a low number? What's the difference between rare disease compared to like a gen med blood pressure medication where you have thousands of individuals? And so these are just questions that may come up that you're able to articulate in a manner that people can appreciate the conversation. They can appreciate you answering the objections of which they have, and then you move forward. And so I think it is an art to how you do that. It is learned behavior. That's not something that you just learn overnight, but it's going to make you that much more of an effective communicator when relaying the data, and it will bring credibility to your message. So
Yeah, there's got to be that light switch that flips off the salesperson
yes.
and puts you more in the peer or advisor mode. Doesn't come overnight like all of this. It's learned, it's practiced. But on the flip side of that, were there any skills that you developed from the commercial side that really translated well into your MSL role that just kind of helped you in that career change?
Yeah, so I want to say this. First of all, just establishing relationships. Some of the biggest challenges that I see with some of the new hires when they come from the pharmacy backgrounds, or if they could come from a research background, they have never really engaged customers. And
Hmm.
so some of them find it challenging. If you're on a medical team, maybe your quota is you need to see 20 people a month or 25 people a month. And so these are kind of like some of the average numbers, and they could be higher than that. But if you're doing that, now you have to reach out via email. And some of the challenges, people will not respond. It's not because they don't respect you, they just don't know who you are. And so, how can I get out to set up these key appointments? Yes, you can use the commercial team, and that's another thing too. There are engagements, initial engagements as an introduction, that there's a reason to develop great relationships with your account managers, your SAMs or your TLLs, whatever the terminology you have that you call, but there's a benefit from establishing these relationships because you can do introductory calls where if they have a lunch, they can introduce you. And from there, now you can put a face with a name and you can set up an appointment later down the road. Also, too, not just relying on emails. I think that's
Hmm.
a big challenge. You have people that just sit at home because no one is responding. And so I do think it's value to getting up and going to some of the offices where they say, well, hey, I don't have an appointment. It's never wasted time because there are key people within the office, whether it be the nurse or the office manager, nurse practitioner. You can find out about best times to see your healthcare professional. Or you can find out what are some of the challenges within the office. There may be some of the clinical questions that the nurse practitioner can answer. So there's a lot of data and information that you can find out just by going out into the office. And not just that, if the worst thing happened, you will find out where the office is at. Because some of the directions may not be the best. Well, this office initially was supposed to be here. Now they moved to here. So there's a lot of key bits of information that you can learn that can truly be valuable. Some of my best conversations I had by just taking the initiative to show up at the office. Maybe I've reached out a few times and I didn't get a return email back in terms of a response. And that may happen because a lot of the hospitals, some of them, anytime they send and see an outside email coming, especially from a pharmaceutical company, it
Mhm.
goes right to their spam account. And so it's
Mhm.
not that they're being rude. Some of them never received your email. So the fact of just showing up, introducing yourself, talking about, hey, this is who I am. I would certainly love to come in and give relevant clinical information and data to give you a therapeutic update. But some of those introductions have led to some great working relationships. Those are some of the skill sets that you get from the commercial team that they don't necessarily give you from the medical team. Now, one of the things that I can say is that I'm beginning to see a lot more organizations do more interpersonal communications, EQ type programs for
Mhm.
their medical science liaisons because some of these individuals are not true extroverts. They're not salespeople. And so a lot of these skills have to be acquired and learned and taught in order to show them how to be effective in to at least initiate the engagement and the conversation. And once the relationship is built, and then I'm quite sure they can take it from there. But one of the biggest challenges is having that first communication with whoever there may be within the office to kind of start this collaborative working relationships.
I think you bring up so many great points. First of all, no appointment is wasted. Like you
Yes.
said, even if you're just finding out where the office is. But there's so many people within that office that it is worthwhile to build those relationships with, even if you don't get a chance to see the HCP or see who you're there to get that appointment with. Nurses, the PA, all of it's valuable. So no appointment wasted. I really think that's important. Also, I think you're 100% correct that a lot of companies are focusing on that EQ side of things because it doesn't come naturally to
That's right.
every MSL. Some MSLs come in and they are just rock stars with the science, and so their role is well earned, but maybe they aren't as strong on being gregarious and outgoing, being that extrovert as maybe somebody else on the team who excels in that area. So I do agree that we're seeing a lot more companies focusing on that. And not every MSL is going to have the same unique background that you have coming from the commercial side and having all that experience. But were there moments when you began on the medical side where maybe that commercial background gave you a really unexpected advantage where you're like, oh, I'm kind of doing things differently and it's working and maybe people were noticing?
Yes, because just strategic planning, a lot
Mhm.
of strategic planning, looking for creative opportunities, working as a marketer too. And, there's a lot of times, even with publications that I've had the opportunity to do, sometimes in order to be effective, you got to create and communicate your value. And
Mhm.
so there's times specifically as it relates to social determinants of health and things that I had had the opportunity to work with in the past that I wasn't afraid to speak up. I wasn't as afraid to speak up and say, hey, this may be a creative opportunity to be an answer to an unmet business need and identify these intrinsic barriers. And by doing so, this led to this, as a matter of fact, this was my first publication that I had the opportunity to participate in. And again, a lot of those skill sets from being in marketing, understanding how to lay out a great strategic plan so people can understand what is the vision. That's the biggest thing. You can have the best ideal in the world, but if you don't know how to carefully articulate it or to show what it can address an unmet business need, and then sometimes that vision or that ideal will never be heard. And so
Mhm.
that may be one of the things that I was able to do. And not just that, even understanding managed care. I've had the opportunity to present at several drug utilization review boards, and even with presenting and articulating the clinical information and the value within our organization. In my past, I probably have participated in maybe 11 to 12, maybe a little bit more than that, but have never lost one. And I would attribute that to having a great commercial background, knowing exactly how to articulate, how to communicate the information, the clinical information without being overwhelming, knowing how to read the room. I think that's a big thing too. You can articulate information, but if people are not receiving the information, then you have to know when to pull back, I want to ask key questions, open-ended questions, not the yes or no questions. But a lot of these skill sets are things that I've learned from the commercial side that's helped me be that much more effective and aware of my surrounding environment when I'm articulating or communicating my
Mhm.
clinical information. So
And what stood out to you most when you switched over to the MSL role? What stood out to you the most about the scientific conversations, or maybe even the depth of the science and the conversations that you were able to begin having as an MSL versus the conversations you were having on the commercial side?
a lot of it is just the talking points. From a compliance point of view, you are held to, okay, this is the sales visual aid. These are the talking points. These are the things that I can address. But in the MSL role, you peel back the onion. So, what does this mean? What does this mean to the data? If you could talk about infection rates, or you could talk about the immunology or the mode of action, it's one thing saying it. Okay, now articulating and explain this mode of action, walk through this immunology piece. Let's talk about various phases of it. And those are the things that you don't necessarily get from the sales. Those are the things that when they ask you, that's when you get stuck and you say, okay, hey, you know what? Maybe I can't answer this information, but let me bring in my medical science liaison, or let me bring in my medical director to address this information and share some additional data or maybe additional publications or speak to that. So that is the biggest difference because in sales, it's like you got to have that confidence. But it
Mhm.
wasn't until I got into that space and I was placed in those positions that I said that, you know what, it's deeper than that. And I have to prepare myself to be in a position that when these questions, and again, you're not going to know everything. And that's the beauty of FAQs. Some of the things that you don't necessarily know, you can report them back to the team and you can add them into the FAQ so you can be better able to address that. But the information that is made readily available to you, you should be able to articulate that information easily once you get that question.
And one thing that you just spoke about, where you were putting yourself in the commercial side in those shoes and saying, let me bring in my MSL to finish this conversation with you, or to have that conversation with you. I imagine we're going to have some listeners out there who aren't really working on either side, maybe aspiring to still get into medical affairs. And they're kind of like, well, what's the big deal? How does that work? So maybe we can kind of strip that bare and talk about the depth of data review and discussion and how they're different between the commercial and the medical side, and maybe the value that MSLs bring to clinicians versus the value that the commercial side brings to those interactions, how they're different, what they each bring to the table from the clinician's point of view.
It's kind of like as a commercial person, I'm able to and some information you just get it right away. So I can sell the sizzle of it. I can sell the excitement and I can talk about it to a certain extent because there's some dynamic sales representatives out there that can articulate the clinical information. But you can't go any further than what that visual sales aid says. And so, from a medical point of view, we're going to know that PI, that protocol, whatever the protocol may be, that package insert, we're going to know that inside and out. We're going to be able to talk about various publications that are directly tied into it. So, with every study you have a lead investigator. And then, not just that, up under the data, there are several publications that all tie into that one publication that you may have utilized to get that drug approved. And so the difference of it is that as a medical person, you know all of the data. You know the
Mhm.
data that's under this. When we talk about percentages, p-values, talking points, speaking point, talking points as it relates to infection rates, immunoglobulin levels, cardiac attack rates, or things. I'm just throwing different things out there. We're able to talk in depth about it and talk about the data behind the data, and
Mhm.
that's the difference, if that makes sense. Whereas on the commercial side, I have a visual sales aid. Within that visual sales aid, this is the overview. I have a 87% reduction, or I got a 32% reduction, and the infection rates was this. How did we get to the infection rates? Can you explain that to me? Okay, I understand that you told me about the mode of action. Can you walk me through that mode of action? That's the difference between commercial and medical. Commercial would tell you that there is a 32% reduction. Commercial would tell you that there was a low incidence of infection rates. Okay, how did we get there? What was the study design? How many patients was in there? So that would be the question that medical would be able to answer, that on the commercial side, it will be, sometimes people say that's above my pay grade. But that's the difference. That's why you have to be collaborative. Everyone working together for one common goal, and one person can't do it all. If you have a sales rep that's trying to be an MSL, they're stepping out of line because there's a lot of data that they just don't get and understand. As a medical science liaison, there's many publications, there's a lot of other data that we get privy to that you don't get from a commercial side. And so that's the importance of, now I'm going to share this data. And it's great when you have a physician that's asking questions, that's where you want them to be at. And so that's why you have a comprehensive care team. If it's a managed care question, I'm not going to try to address it if I don't understand it and know it. I'm going to bring in my managed care person. If I have nurses that assist me, whether it be infusion nurses, and there are questions around, then I'm going to bring that person in. And if it's a clinical question, then I'm going to bring in my MSL. But, that's the beauty of having a comprehensive care team, a care team specifically within the organizations. And everybody has a specific skill set in certain areas that you want to reach out to bring into, or maybe just say it's difficult for one or two individuals to get in to see this person. And so now you have a comprehensive day that you're bringing in all of the key individuals on this team to talk about various aspects of, whether it be reimbursement, whether it be the medical team, things that they can present. There's a firewall. Some of the data you can't present in front of that team, but the information, if it's a disease state information, if you can present that, then that will be the information that you can present. But sometimes it may be best to bring in your complete team to give an overview. And so therefore you're able to better address these providers without, okay, well, we only get one appointment, but pick out what's most important, who needs to go and see them, opposed to everyone having at least 5 to 10 minutes or 3 minutes that they can present and talk about information that may be beneficial.
And that's what healthy, compliant collaboration should look like.
Yes.
It sounds like you've worked in environments where that has been the way things have been done. I hear in the recruiting role, we hear every day that people work for companies where there is that firewall, and the company expects those two departments to be separate and not really work together as closely as people would like to work together and have that collaborative
Mhm.
environment. And so we try to speak to our clients, and most of them that we work with at least understand the importance of healthy collaboration between the two sides, and how that can benefit the company and the mission of the company as a whole. But maybe, do you have any examples of times where having that strong, compliant, collaborative environment, that aligned teamwork between commercial and medical, where that made a significant impact?
So one of the situations that I think is beneficial is having monthly insight discussions. And these monthly insight discussions is when the commercial team will come with the medical team, and the medical team is able to share bits and pieces of information about the customer. It may have been things that they like, things that they don't like, and then vice versa. And when I worked for one organization, and this was on the commercial side, and I think it was beneficial because on the commercial side, we had just launched a new product. And within that new product, this was a huge academic center. And that academic center, for whatever reason, there was a slow uptake in terms of how they were utilizing this particular drug. And so we were trying to find out what was the reason why. The drug was a great drug, but for whatever reason, they were reluctant and hesitant to use it. And so, we kept asking, and we would go back to the healthcare provider, and for whatever reason, they would say, no, everything is just fine. But then on the medical side, they spoke to the medical side and said, and told them it was taking too long for the patients to get on drugs. So therefore, it's difficult for them to write the product. And so because of that collaboration and communication from the insight discussions, we were able to devise a plan and come up with a program that was a fast start program. And within that fast start program, patients went from, it initially took 29 to 28 days for patients to get the drug, and the patients were able to get the drug within a span of 2 to 3 days. So that was a huge collaboration that I was able to do, and this was when I was on the commercial side. And from those best practices, I utilize a lot of the insight discussions as a medical, person now working with my commercial counterparts, whether it be establishing relationships. There's a lot of information that I've been able to find out. And then there may have been challenges that that person had that I knew nothing about that I was able to shed some light because I maybe have had a better relationship with their office that helped them to gain entrance into the office, to be able to serve the office better. But I would just say insight discussions of individuals are not doing it. And again, this is not about clinical data, things that are not that the commercial team is not privy to, but it's just more of insight, understanding each account, the challenges, what are the gaps, how can we assist or help out each other within my role? What can I do to make things better, and vice versa? The same thing from the commercial to the medical teams.
Why do you think, from your perspective, why do you think some organizations are still struggling to encourage collaboration if it has all those benefits? And what would you say if you had the platform? What would you
Yeah.
say to those leaders who are hesitant? And sometimes it's the leader above the leader. So it's sometimes the MSL manager or whoever is in charge. It's kind of above their pay grade, so to speak. But what would you say to those leaders who are hesitant to foster that collaborative environment?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they may be risk averse. And if you
Mhm.
do things in a compliant and a strategic manner with processes and systems in place, fail proof systems, then I think you will be very successful. And understanding, breaking down what can be said. And again, one of the key things is that we know that from commercial team cannot direct the medical team at all. You cannot direct them, but you can give great information and insight into some of the things that are taking place. And so I think some of those conversations are great because if you're out there, sometimes you can be out there by yourself if you're not communicating. There are a lot of things that you may be doing that you don't necessarily have to do. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. And it just may be, when is the best time to see the HCP?
Mm,
Or what are some of the hot buttons? What are some of the things that you may not want to say coming into the office? What are some of the things that you do to come across as being human? Meaning, knowing what are some of the likes. Maybe they have some of the hobbies that you have some things in common, but a lot of these skill sets are the soft skill sets that you learn on the commercial side that you can share, and vice versa too. There may be some of the challenges that the medical team can offer, like, hey, this person don't necessarily like pushy commercial individuals that like to push their agenda. They like to be methodical into their approach, or they like to maybe they learn best with lunch and learns,
mhm,
or maybe they don't like to meet in person. Maybe they like to do virtual discussions and conversations. So there's a lot of things that can be done. There's you can in a strategic way and understand and learn the firewall where
mhm,
commercial don't direct the medical team. And then when the presentations occur, they don't occur in the same room again. If there's an introduction, you can do a one-time introduction. And that one-time introduction is just to introduce and this is kind of like a handoff. Hey, this is our new commercial team or a commercial counterpart, or hey, this is our new medical counterpart. I know the last time I came in, you said that you wanted some deeper information. And so I'm introducing he or she to you, and you can set up an appointment at another time. But at least I wanted to do a soft handoff. So there's a lot of benefits to doing things in a compliant manner that can be beneficial, even from working with advocacy groups. I
mhm,
know there's one organization that I used to work for in the past that I was a person that got patient programs and advocacy groups approved. And this had never been done within the history of the organization. And it took me 6 months to accomplish this task because there was concept meetings with legal, with compliance to show how things could be done in an ethical manner. Some of the biggest misconceptions is because just because you never done it doesn't mean that it can't be done. You
mhm,
have to look at other organizations. If other organizations are doing things, if the organizations that are doing things, if they are following the OIG guidelines, and you say, okay, if everybody else is doing it, why can't we do it? Let's seek to understand what's taking place. What are some of the compliant guardrails that they have in place, and how can we mirror that to work for our organization? And I think that's the biggest thing. Not to say that hey, it can't be done, but how can we do it in a compliant manner, seeking to understand the new environments. Some people like the book Who Moved My Cheese. One of the biggest things is dealing with change. A lot of people love doing things the same old way. Oh, we've never done it this way. It can't be done. But just because you've never done it that way doesn't mean that it can't be done. How can we do it in a way that's going to be beneficial moving forward in the new era? Because change is inevitable. Things are always changing. And if you don't move with it, it'll move without you. And so we have to learn how can we do things in an effective manner that's going to be beneficial, but yet and still that will work for the organization as a whole.
That sums it up perfectly. Thank you. We were going to take some sound bites from that and pass it along to some of these hesitant people. But I think that your experience coming from both sides of the table here and how the collaboration has worked so well and the importance of that collaboration that you shed light on, I think it's such a unique viewpoint that you come with first and foremost, having been on both sides, but also just the fact that you bring in all these other personal passions of emotional intelligence and things like that, and how that plays into a successful transition, successfully collaborative while still being compliant relationship. And so I think that you've summed it up really perfectly. And I know we're coming up on the end of our time here, but I wanted to just cover a couple of quick questions, some little rapid fire wrap up questions. But what one practice do you find that consistently helps you build better relationships with your providers?
There's a term out there, and I know sometimes people say it's cliche, but no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think having taken a genuine interest in learning the office, the dynamics of the office, and the pros and the cons, and how can you be a collaborative partner. So when people mention your name, they call you by your first name and not necessarily by saying, hey, this is a drug rep. Because even as a medical science liaison, people could say, hey, you're a drug rep, and it's completely different. But take time to learn and understand what are the true challenges. How can you best assist, the healthcare provider that you're working with? How can you bring value? And the thing that I used to hear the most is sometimes on the commercial team when there was a healthcare provider and there was a medical science liaison was out there and say, hey, don't bring that person into the office anymore because they brought no value. And so learning how to bring value, not just showing up, but to check the box, but showing up to bring value and to address gaps and unmet needs specifically that may be within the practice, and being able to serve as a resource for various things. Even though I work on the medical team, when they have certain challenges on the commercial side, they'll reach out to me. Who can I reach out to? Can you put me in contact with someone? Or I have a challenge in this particular spot. Can you direct me in this? And so to me, that's one of the greatest compliments because that means that I bring value and they understand the relationship that we have as collaborative partner, and they know that when there's something that needs to be done, whether it be medically related or if they need connections on a commercial team, they know that I can provide that information or at least direct them in the right areas.
Well, last question. And we've talked about this a little bit, but if you could sum it up in one piece of advice that you would give to a commercial professional who is considering the medical path, what would that major piece of advice be?
Just if you're really and truly serious about it, it's and I won't say it's going to be a tough road, but you have to be intentional in terms of what you really and truly want to do. About a game plan, and again, find a good program to be a part of. A highly accredited university. You're not just looking just to say, hey, I have a PhD program from a university no one has never heard about. Someone that's accredited, someone that's certainly within the clearinghouse. Make sure that that's there. And then look at the program because last thing you ever want to do is go through all of the coursework into a program that people see is not credible or doesn't have value or the necessary core courses is going to help you to be successful in your next phase as a medical science liaison. So when you begin to go through those courses and you look through the courses and you see clinical research courses and you see whether it be in whatever area, everybody is not going to have a PhD in biochem or immunology and things of that nature. There are a lot of other things that will give you the clinical courses that you need, but could be something that you can embrace. And then you're going to be drawn into and be active within it. So once you find that, you stick with it and you take a course, a class at a time, and then you begin to build your pathway to reach out to the resources with the rotations, or have an opportunity to have a mentor on the medical side to ask them, can I do a ride along? And that's one of the things. Can I do a ride along to see a day in the life of a medical science liaison? Could I come out and just be a fly on the wall at one of the programs to hear some of the questions that are being addressed, so you can begin to mentally prepare yourself for, if this is your next move, that's going to give you a charge in order, because there's going to be some times when you feel overwhelmed and you feel like you want to stop, or why is this worth it? You will see the difference, the engagement, the interactions that are taking place, hearing some of the conversations, why this medical science liaison puts you in a position to be a life changer, and how you make a difference, and know that if you are complete this program, you have an opportunity to work in your passion. And they say when you work within your passion, you'll never work another day in your life because you don't consider it work. So once you have found the program, done the necessary work to make sure that it's credible, aligned yourself with the right resources, went through the core courses, and then find a pathway, because when you finish, you don't want to just sit and idle. You certainly want to have a pathway to purpose, and that purpose is being in the MSL position in a area that you love. And your first position, there may be in a therapeutic area that you don't necessarily understand a lot of, but because you have a foundational basis, it will give you an opportunity to go from whatever program, whether it be from oncology to neurology to GI, rheumatology. That foundation will allow you to have an understanding that where you can adapt in any therapeutic area that you may go into.
Very well said. And I appreciate that perspective, that last point you added on about the therapeutic areas, because I think a lot of people need to hear that. But Corey, this has been such a great conversation. And of course, I always enjoy hearing the different perspectives people have. And I've enjoyed hearing your perspective, of course, not just on the transition from commercial to medical, but on what true collaboration can look like within an organization. And you have such a grounded and easy to understand way of explaining things. And so it's clear how much your experience on both sides has really shaped how you work. And for those of you listening, if Corey's insights have made you think differently about how commercial and medical can partner, or if you've been encouraged about your own career path, we would genuinely love to hear from you. There, as always, is a link in the show notes below where you can share your thoughts or ask questions or even talk about your experiences navigating this kind of transition. We'd be really, really interested to hear those as well. And we'll also include Corey's LinkedIn so you can connect with him. You can find him on LinkedIn, follow his work, and learn more about everything he's involved in, inside and outside of medical affairs, really. He's got his hand kind of in everything these days, giving back in every way possible, which we love. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode of MSL 411. And thank you so much, Corey, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here.
Thank you so much again. It was a pleasure to be here, and just having a platform to be able to share a few pearls of wisdom that may be beneficial to someone out there. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share the link, let your friends know, and of course, connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you want more information on today's topic, please feel free to reach out. Be sure to check back soon as we continue to explore the topics that matter most to you in medical affairs.